A trial that was scheduled to begin this week. But what does that mean for President Trump? Let's bring in Tyler Grant. He's a lawyer and a political writer for Young Voices. This agreement calls for Paul Manafort to cooperate with Paul Manafort, but the president has had a different word for this. He calls it flipping. Do we necessarily know exactly what it is Paul Manafort's going to be able to provide Robert Mueller?
So that's the important thing with ongoing criminal investigations, is that typically the people that are talking about it don't necessarily know, and the people that do know aren't talking about it. And there's a lot of commentary on Twitter and some talking heads that say that this means that he's limited in what he can talk about and might not necessarily be able to talk about Russian collusion, Russian interference. The plea agreement says specifically that Paul Manafort is at the expense of the government to cooperate fully in any manner that they deem relevant.
And that has been kind of the hallmark of the convictions that they have gotten in this investigation. You look at many of the major figures, they have taken plea agreements. They have pleaded guilty to a lot of these cases. Paul Manafort now joins that club. Is that the preferred way for an investigation like this to get the help of the people as they work their way up the chain?
So this is certainly the biggest player that's pleaded guilty. Plea agreements are typically the most preferred way for criminal defendants that have a prolonged trial. There's a lot of unknowns when you go to trial, and typically you can get a deal. And in Paul Manafort's case, having already pled guilty in the Eastern District of Virginia, he has the benefit of...
Well, he was convicted in the Eastern District.
Convicted, yeah, right, correct. And so having the ability to do a plea agreement kind of can lower the amount of time that he could serve under this under the new charge.
Well, let's talk about that conviction, because you know, he did go to trial in Alexandria and he was found guilty. And at that point, the president said, well, you know, Paul Manafort's a good man, and he attacked the investigation, he attacked the trial. Now Paul Manafort himself is saying, I did this, I'm guilty. So what does that say about this witness who's now going to come forward and going to cooperate with prosecutors if they have already been convicted in one trial and now are saying, well, I did it, I'm going to work with you in this case? The opponents would say that now this man has a vested interest in telling the prosecutors what they want to hear.
Well, so Paul Manafort is no stranger to very strange dealings in Ukraine and pro-Russia affiliation. I mean, this was a guy that while under house arrest in December was drafting an op-ed, or helping draft an op-ed to be put in an English pro-Russia Ukrainian newspaper.
Help get him locked up.
Exactly, and that's one of the major problems with this player. And now that he's been caught and convicted under conspiracy, and Mueller has been able to establish conspiracy, bringing people in on that conspiracy is easier, perhaps.
And that, in fact, is one of the charges that he had pled guilty to, conspiracy against the United States of America. As we move through this right now, we expect a sentencing at some point. That probably will not be right away, though, right? They're going to have to work with Manafort a while before we get into a situation where they'd be setting a prison sentence on this?
Typically, I mean, it's up to the judge's discretion. I mean, the scheduling of that is probably not going to be some sort of prolonged amount of time, but we should be able to see that relatively quickly.
All right, Tyler Grant from Young Voices. We thank you so much for coming in with us this morning. All right, as we continue.